I feel like I could get found out at any point. The imposter syndrome is just real.
But rewinding that a year and watching you put online videos of your nights where you're like, there's 4 people in this audience, I hope more arrive.
I made no money. I sold out an entire month in a much bigger venue than you usually debut in. And I made £300. That was my fear the whole way running up to it. This is the moment where people realise I'm not a big deal. Everything I've achieved in life has come from spite, but now I've got to keep doing it. Can I do it again? That was the goal. Like, you wanted to become one of those comics that could walk into any room and you can still make them laugh. Whereas now I think that is actually becoming less of the goal, because people can go on the internet now and build their own audience.
It feels to me like you're like, it's a waste of time because it's not going viral.
Well, if you don't care about me, I'm going to make you care about me. I don't like it because it feels like a magician revealing how the trick's done.
Abi Clarke, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here and coming. I'm really genuinely grateful. It was interesting because when I spoke to you and you were uncomfortable with the idea of being on a podcast which is called How to Be Famous.
Yes.
And the reason I wanted you on here, and why I think it fits the brief beautifully, is because you're in a really interesting place with everything that feels like it's firstly in the process of blowing up, but also you're just about to go on what is probably your first full like tour sold under your own name, effectively.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, people know your name. What is it like? The whole thing, like, how are you finding it? Terrifying.
Anxiety inducing. It's hard. I guess we kind of were talking about it before, but it's I guess it all looks great.
Yeah.
And that's the point.
Yeah,
and I'm so glad it looks good. But it really is just me behind it all. So you do just feel like the imposter syndrome is just real, because you're like, yeah, this is great. This looks great. I'm going on a tour. It's under my name. But like, I feel like I could get found out at any point.
Yeah.
That just like, it's not as impressive as it seems. But then like things, I had that with like Clapham.
Yeah.
Because I just did the Clapham Grand. And that was my fear the whole way running up to it, was just like, I'm going to get found out. I'm going to get found out. This is the moment where people realise I'm not a big deal. And then actually, it wasn't until like halfway through the show that I was like, oh shit, there's loads of people here. Like, this is huge. I'm like, this is actually really impressive. But I think it just never because we all look at things and we're like, wow, I don't know, like people on telly, or if you go see, like even just now, sitting in the Comedy Store in the audience, you're like, oh, this is nice. This is a lovely night out. Like,
and they haven't seen how we're all squashed in that tiny little room out the back.
You don't see the green room. I think everything like looks more impressive than it feels in the moment.
Yeah.
And it is just taking those moments where you can go, oh wow, actually no, I've really smashed this. This is, if like younger me saw it, and this was the dream.
It's really hard as well to do that. I mean, I remember I gave up my full-time job 8 years ago. I only had a full-time job for 5 minutes because I do not deal well with authority. But I was working, doing like a real sort of straight out of uni marketing job, and gave it up to do this. And the first year was really stressful for all the reasons that you'd expect. Like, is it the right thing to do? Like, I was listening to something at one point just before that when someone was like, it's never going to feel comfortable, so just take the leap. And so I was like, yeah, fine. And I was kind of forced into it, as I suppose you were as well, with sort of COVID and those sorts of things. But we'll come to that in shortly. But I remember I was sort of 6 months into it, and I was driving home. I got this really naff office that was where HS2 was being built in Euston. They were going to knock down this old hospital. And in order just to keep the place running, they were giving these office spaces like for next to nothing, on the condition that they can kick you out tomorrow because they're going to knock it down for HS2. So I managed to get this office space to just try and keep myself in the buzz rather than being sort of in my parents' living room in Surrey. Yeah. And I was driving home from there one day, and I remember driving past Westfield and seeing a billboard for Ed Sheeran's Divide album. and thinking for the first time ever, not, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, like if you were, you know, those things that you see online where you kind of see the billboard and you're like, oh my God. Or having the realization that if you're Ed Sheeran, for example, or whoever it may be, driving around the corner and seeing that billboard, you don't get that like, oh my God, look, I've made it moment. You get, I've made a million decisions and stresses and strains to get to the point where that is there. So even like the artwork I've signed off and like, do we put this in? And so all of these tiny little decisions. So when it gets to something like that, like it was just a whopping great billboard on the side of Westfield, or doing Clapham Grand or the tour or whatever, I feel like you've all the steps to get there have been so small and you've been so in the weeds of it. You almost sometimes have to shake yourself to look at it and go, oh my God, I'm actually doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always like, I guess it's just the ever moving finish line.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I've done this, but like, could I don't know. You're like, now I've got to do the tour, or I don't know. But it was amazing. I'd say Clapham Grand is actually like one of the moments where I have gone, oh, I did a thing that was really one of my dreams. But now I'm like, but now I've got to keep doing it. Can I do it again? But yeah, I think it's like, it feels more legit when other people give you it. I think. And that's why I think I always feel like I get the imposter syndrome bad, because I very much, everything I've achieved in life has come from spite. Like it is my biggest drive. And like, I don't know, I was talking to my housemate about it the other day, where I was like, I feel like there's people out there who have talent and luck, and it combines in this moment, and they have this wonderful career sprout from it. And I don't feel like I've ever had the luck. And I mean, I'm not saying...
Do you find peace in that though? Because here's the thing that I found, right, is there's been times in my life where it's been a flip of a coin, where something could come off or couldn't come off. And then, you know, sometimes there was one thing when I first started that was going to be a really big opportunity, and then someone else got the opportunity. And in my head, at the time, I was like, this is really painful. And you kind of reel from it. And then now, retrospectively, I look back and go, nothing that I am doing is based on luck. So I've got control over that. So just the way it hasn't arrived by luck, it can't necessarily be taken away by luck.
That's true. That is true. I think I'm just tired. I think I was that kid, like even at school, I loved drama. I was an absolute drama kid, but I never got the part in the show. I was never the best actor. I was just never the one that got it. And I put on my own play. I was that kid that was like, all right, well, if you won't cast me, I'll cast myself. And I just have lived my life like that. And I think that's kind of what's happened with my career as well. It was lockdown, stand-up went. I was like, okay, well, I'll do this. And I feel like even just like my agent, the like gigs I get now is all because I was like, well, if you don't care about me, I'm going to make you care about me. And that's the only reason people have interest. And I think there is an element where you tell yourself of like, okay, yeah, I'm doing the Clapham Grand, but it's not that impressive because I forced my way in rather than had someone give it to me. But equally, it does make the payoff very sweet, because you are like, I did that. But I don't know. I think it's just like I am like, when am I just going to get given something? I just like to rest. It'd just be really nice to have someone else.
You said the payoff was sweet. I was like, yeah, but also you're just like, I'm so drained.
But then you're just so tired. You're so tired
all the time. It's interesting though, because like I feel like in a roundabout sort of way, you and I have come from similar places in terms of your parents were in showbiz or actors or have I got that right? Yeah, you looked at me then like, what? That's someone else's parents.
I'm like, well, showbiz is pushing it, but they're actors.
But but my experience of it is that it is like, it's never really given. Like the illusion is that it is. You know, my experience is, and maybe, to be honest, this is just me finding peace with it myself, but I feel like everyone is, to grow is stretching rather than it just arriving. And you know, I might be wrong, but whenever anyone said that to me, like, oh, I'm not really trying, like, I'm like, oh, you know, like, how are you here?
Yeah. I don't think you can ever know how hard I think I do have that though, especially within comedy. Like, I think so many people, comedy itself comes so effortlessly.
Yeah.
Like, just in a conversation, someone will be hilarious.
Yeah.
And you're like, and I do sometimes, I'm like, should it be this hard? Should I be having to work this hard? But I think it's just people have different things and like different reasons why they get somewhere. And I think my thing is just grafting, and I just have to accept that. But I think that's why it's sometimes when you arrive somewhere, you're like, do I deserve this? Or is it just because I forced it? Like, I just refused any other option. But then that is why when you can halfway through the show go, wait, no, people are laughing and this is going well and this is paying off. You're like, okay, I think this is legit.
Have you had that thing when, like, post clap of grand or whatever, where you wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, that's so many people. Yeah. Like, that's more people than I've ever had in a room, all looking at me. Like, what if I mess up? And like, even though it's happened like in the past, like I had that in my first big show and there was 600 people in. I remember waking up after the show going, oh, I could have messed it up. Like, what?
I think, I don't know. It was weird because like, I don't think you ever really consider how many people it is. And because like, for example, online, like 700 people online, I'd be like, our video bombed. Like that, like it doesn't feel like many people. Yeah. So I think that was also like in the stress of like selling and everything. I was like, oh, that's like, it's not enough people. It's not enough people. But then when you put that many bodies actually in a room, it's amazing. And I guess that's what people say about that whole, like, you only need like 1,000 true fans to have a career or something. I feel like people say, and you are like, yeah, that fills a theatre.
yeah. You know, people liking you and coming back is what builds the career, right? Like my numbers have gone, they kind of double year on year, mainly because people feel like they know you and they care about you and want to come back. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think you're really good at that as well, in terms of like bringing people on your journey with you.
Yeah, that was the aim.
Yeah.
I think I did want people to see the full story, I guess, and see like how much work goes in. But I guess it is a little bit like, I had one person being like, I don't like it because it feels like a magician revealing like how the trick's done. Like, I don't want to know that you have to put this much effort in. I want to think you're just being spontaneously hilarious. But I think I was just like, that's what I like. The people I follow online are people that I've followed for years, and I feel like I'm part of it and I'm rooting for them, and I've seen where they've come from. So then their successes, I can be proud of them because I know what's gone into it. Whereas if you just share your successes, people are just going to be like, oh, well. Yeah, that always happens for you. Like, I think you have to share the lows for people to want to celebrate your highs as well.
It's really interesting, sort of your sort of growth, I suppose, because, you know, it was basically a COVID, like, was the genesis of it, really, I suppose, in sort of, certainly sort of like the track you're on now. Am I right in saying that, in that, like, you kind of started creating stuff? In fact, I heard you talk about this, and so I think this is a really important point to make, is because I heard you say that you sort of like every day for 2 years were making stuff and editing stuff. Yeah. And my feeling with stuff is, that's the tiredness creeping back in again.
See, this might mean, but when can I stop? When does it stop? No.
But I feel like with all of this stuff, like the growth is exponential. So you have to just go ride or die sometimes. And I think it's that with the tour show or whatever, like you make the decision that this is my life now, I'm going to tour, and then all of a sudden these things happen that is just because that's the track you kind of set your mind to, I think. And I think, you know, in terms of sort of going from sort of nowhere, shall we say, like not having any following to having one, just posting every day is probably a good way to move, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been able to post every day. I don't know how anyone does that. And that's what they all tell you to do now, all of these platforms. They're like, well, you got to be posting like 2 times a day. I'm like, are you insane? Like, when do I live my life? So I've never really been able to keep up with how much the algorithm wants you to post. But during lockdown, obviously, there was nothing else going on. So I was able to kind of churn it out. But the difficult thing was coming out of lockdown and then being like, oh, I'm expected to continue this now. Even though I wanted to do live stand-up, because I was doing live stand-up before, but only for like a year. So I was still quite new. And then I came out of it and I was like, well, I want to go back to stand-up, but I now have this other thing I have to keep alive, I guess, until I've done stand-up long enough to then sell a show to them.
It is really interesting to me, like how we're in a time where all of that stuff, I kind of, if you rewind even a little bit, I remember thinking maybe 10 years ago, like camera equipment's getting really cheap. Like how is TV going to have this sort of like monopoly anymore? And it's just gone. Like, but then it just means that us as being people on stage are responsible for making the stuff.
Yeah, I do have that. Like the few times that I have got to do a TV thing or like a little like BBC Online thing, like I turn up to the days and the amount of crew they have for such a simple video, I'm like, we don't need any of you.
Yeah.
And they're all being paid a wage and they all have a specific job. Like they have a lighting person, they have a sound person, they have a camera person, they have a director, they have like a runner. And I'm like, I do sometimes just sit there. I'm like, I do all of your jobs. No wonder I am so tired. But like, oh my God, it's such a treat. It's like luxury to be like, oh, I don't have to care about whether the light looks good. And I don't have to care about whether the camera's straight or whether I've got like a bogey. Someone will tell me, someone's doing continuity. I'm not going to get to the end of the shoot and be like, well, I have to refilm the whole thing. Someone's making sure the sound's right. Like it's an absolute luxury, but you are like, it is mad now because people do all of your jobs just by themselves. And just, that's the expectation as well. That's what you got to do now.
So you're sort of, there's two questions I suppose I want to ask, which are kind of tied to that, which is the first one is when we talk about sort of tired, it seems to be very much the running
title
theme.
of the episode is tired.
Yeah, I've got nothing left.
A quote from my Edinburgh vlog, actually, that is, I got nothing left. Another guy from EastEnders.
How much of that do you think is the creative sort of, you need to be like your brain is always switched on to be thinking of ideas? Because I think that's a lot of it, is like my notes app is just hell on earth because it's just a stream of consciousness of like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And also the other half of it is like just spinning a million plates and like trying not to let any of them fall.
Yeah, it's the plate one I find hard.
Yeah.
Because it is, I think, it's just having so many jobs.
Yeah.
It's not like one job. It's not what it used to be where your job was just to write and perform comedy, or your job was just to act, or your job was just to write, or like that doesn't really exist anymore. Like comedians have to have multiple things at multiple times. And that's not even the ones that have embraced socials yet. They've still got a podcast. They're still writing a sitcom. They're still doing stand-up. They're still like, and I think that's the impossible thing, because to give one thing the amount of time it actually needs to be good, and another thing falls down. Like I feel like when my socials are doing good, I haven't written a single new stand-up joke in like 2 months. And then when my stand-up feels really great, my socials have like died. And I think that's what I found difficult when I was trying to like build a show. Because like you say, you want people to come back. You don't want to just be like, oh, I'm that influencer you follow, come to my show the moment. Because I could have come out of lockdown, be like, I'm putting on a show, sold it out much easier because it was like peak time. But the show would have been shit. And they would have been like, oh, it was actually a bit disappointing. Oh, well. And then they wouldn't have come back. Whereas like I've just always been obsessed. I'm trying to let it go, but being like a proper stand-up. And be respected by the comedy industry as well. And just do it properly. Like go and do the gigs and take my time on making the show a show that would be a good stand-up show, whether you follow me online or not. And I feel like that pays off, but it is like that's taken me 5 years really in total, from when I started stand-up to when I actually finally had a show, like an hour of material that's all good enough. And I was just trying to keep my socials warm that entire time. And that was and has been really difficult. And my socials did suffer from it. And then I do like Edinburgh, and you kind of realize yeah, socials aren't going anywhere. Like, I shouldn't have really, I better get back on there.
How do you, so are you quite, but it's interesting because like that sort of once takes me in two separate sort of directions of things I would like, I'm so intrigued to find out about. But the first thing I suppose is, are you in tune with like the algorithm and those sorts of things?
No, we don't get on.
No.
But I'd love to be in tune with the algorithm.
Is it something like, so when you're posting, do you look at the data of it, or are you just sort of just posting what you find funny and hoping for the best?
I'm just posting what I find funny and hoping for the best, but I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think this is the issue I've had with the like journey of it.
Yeah.
Because when I first started, I didn't have like a long-term plan or goal. I was just like, oh, I'm going viral. This is great. I want to keep going viral. This is good.
The entire drive.
This is a lot of attention. I'm enjoying it. This is going well. So I really was just like churning out what I thought the algorithm wanted.
Yeah.
I was just like, this will do well on TikTok, so I'll make it.
Yeah. And
that will build my following. And then I can stop making TikToks once lockdown's over.
Yeah. And
then they'll just come watch me do stand-up. That was the dream. And then... So then I built this huge following, but then I remember doing my first stand-up gig back where a load of online people came. And I realized that actually a lot of my material didn't perfectly overlap with the wholesome, just very general, relatable content I'd been making. And it was like, oh, actually, what is the point of having a big following if they don't find what I find funny?
Yeah.
And so then, like, ever since, I've really tried to be like, only make it if I find it funny, because then I'm going to be building an audience that will enjoy my comedy when they come see me live. But that's very difficult. I think it's difficult to like change people over or move people over if originally they'd followed for one thing.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to be like, oh, actually, that was all lies. And this is what I actually want to make. It's kind of like I regularly am just like, maybe I just start a new page and only post what I find funny. But I'm too scared to do that. But
yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's probably like the right way of doing it, right? Like even if it's slower, like there's people that grow these massive pages that sort of just by doing that, by going, there's a dip in their attention there, let's cut that bit out and repost it. I had a really interesting conversation with Max Fosh about this.
Wow. So he'll like post it, edit, then repost?
No. So he's the opposite.
Oh.
So his conversation to me was, the problem with that is it's like seeing graffiti on a subway, is that people will scroll past it and see it and like it, but it won't stick in their heads. Like it's not, like they're not building a relationship with you. Whereas I think he's really good at not posting unless it's something that he wants to make.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's taken him however long it's taken him. He's been doing it for a long time. But people go and search out what his next thing is now, which is why he's able to sell out the Palladium. Whereas I think sometimes when you're doing it in the short term, like, what's the right thing for the algorithm today? I think firstly, it sends you a bit insane.
Yeah.
And also, secondly, I mean, some of the stuff that I posted that's gone huge is huge for entirely the reasons that I wouldn't want it to go huge. You know, it's like you get a load of stuff, like a load of people commenting on it for a different reason to what the objective was, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there's a lot in that really, and sort of like, it's sort of almost like a ship that you have to move slowly, you know, of sort of like, you can't just switch from one to the other.
No, I'm just like slowly trying to introduce more. Well, I think like my that's why I do the ASOS videos, is because I think of all of those original sketches I became known for, that one, it has the most overlap with my actual sense of humor.
Yeah.
And also like the world I love to observe, which is girls, fashion, women in their 20s. So like that was a purposeful. I was like, this is something they already like, but is closer to me. Let's do more of that rather than if cats were human, which just cats only do so much. Like you can't keep that going.
When I saw your show in Edinburgh, because Edinburgh's where I saw your show, I was really impressed with how when you came on that you knew exactly who you were and what you're trying to say, even to the point of like the Groovy Tick t-shirt. And when you first came on, like you came on with like a purpose of like, you tell the audience what the show is in your first 3 seconds of how you're walking on stage and all those sorts of things. I thought that was really clever and really interesting. And so I totally see what you're saying, because like you're very, like you and I are quite similar ages, I think. And it's like the stuff you were saying, I was like, this is so funny and so relatable to me and people who are our age.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen High School Musical, either you're too young or too old, you're not going to, like, if you're not in that age range, this is just sort of my reference point of like how old you are. Like if if High School Musical defined your generation, you'll find it funny. And if you're too young for it or too old for it, then those sort of like groovy chick references might fall away, I suppose.
Yeah. But I guess that is also why I did 5 years doing the circuit.
Yeah.
Is so that, because I think that's a good thing about socials, is you can be so specific with your comedy. You can find like your exact audience, which I didn't technically do, but you can, and I see other people do. I went very general, and now I'm trying to actually define it down. But you can, like, I remember when I first started in my show, my oldest bit, like one of my first bits, was a bit about Twilight, and it was performing that to general comedy club audiences who are just like men in their 50s mostly. I had to really hone the bit so that it was still funny to anyone who hadn't watched Twilight.
Yeah.
Which is great. Like, it's now like my longest running bit. It's actually one of my most solid bits. But I had other bits around it that they got dropped because it was like, when I first started stand-up in Bristol and I was just performing to young students who were there for a free night, it was like dating stuff, but it was so relatable. They loved it. I was like, oh my God, I'm a star. and then I got my first gig in South Devon and I was like, oh shit.
I brought the average age down of this room quite considerably.
And it was like, I suddenly realized, I was like, they don't give a shit. They don't care. They don't care about my life as a 20-year-old girl. Like, they're like, mate, we're married. We've been married 30 years. We don't give a shit about your dating stories. Like, we've all got these jobs that you can't relate. And I did, when I first started, I had to do a lot of sex material because I realized that was the only thing everyone in the room had done.
Yeah. What's really interesting, actually, I've seen this the other way, right? And I don't know how much I'm allowed to say this story, but I'm going to tell you anyway. We have to cut it out. We have to cut it out. I went to see Ed Burns' show in Edinburgh like 4 or 5 years ago, right? And it was the opposite of what you're saying. It was like very much his audience, talking about him and his kids and his wife and his family and like, bedtimes are a pain, like all of that sort of stuff. And my auntie had just done, I think, a pilgrimage program with him, and they were up in Edinburgh. So long story short, we ended up going to this bar near, or this hotel bar near where the assembly rooms were, and he got absolutely rat-assed off his face, like so drunk. And we sat there after about 3 hours, and he looks at his phone and then looks up and then looks at his phone and goes, I forgot I'm doing Late and Live tonight. So Late and Live was obviously a late night comedy thing. And so I was like, let's go, because I was at the Gilded Balloon that year. So we walked back and just staggered back from the assembly rooms to the Gilded Balloon and watched him go on stage, now hammered, try and do the same material to a Late and Live audience, which is all students. And he was going, bedtimes, huh? And they were like, what?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting watching him dig deep to try and find stuff that was either A, universal, or B, play to the room. And there's a skill set in it. Like, there's really a skill set in doing that, and did it in the end. But it was interesting. I think that's probably something that you never lose, because you'll always have your core, and then you'll come into rooms where you're like, I'm in.
Well, I think that is what, like, the benefit of doing the circuit is. I think it's a weird world now because of the internet. You don't, like, when I first started stand-up, it was all about, like, you need to learn how to play every room. Yeah. Like, that was the goal. Like, you wanted to become one of those comics that could walk into any room. They could be anyone. Yeah. And you can still make them laugh. Like, that was always the goal. Whereas now I think that is actually becoming less of the goal, because people can go on the internet now and build their own audience and perform comedy that, because I guess there's the difference. I think there are the comics that can play any room, but they're not the comics that in particular rooms have people
obsessed.
folding over. Like, so they can make everyone laugh, but then there's some comics that in other rooms, yeah, they're gonna bomb, but in their room, like, people are weeing themselves.
Yeah.
And
that's still the old people next month.
Yeah. But like, I think I'm still trying to, but I am really glad that I did do that. I want to be able to play every room, because it does mean on those more difficult shows where it is Edinburgh Fringe and you've got the like older Edinburgh Fringe goers who are just coming to see what your show's about and are falling asleep in the front row, and like, you still know you've got jokes that are going to get them, and you still, and it's like you turn up to gigs and you're like, oh, this is a different audience. You can be like, okay, I've got this material, I've got that material, rather than just walking in, oh, everyone's over 50, I'm fucked, which is when I started, how I was like, I've got nothing, I'm just going to go have to die on my ass for 10 minutes. Whereas now I'm like, I've got something.
Do you get that thing where you see the audience before the show and you're either like, I don't know, you're either nervous in a good way or nervous in a bad way? I think this about Edinburgh actually, and I thought this more this year than I ever have, is that the Edinburgh audience is so mercurial like that. It's either students or like middle class families from Surrey. Like, it's kind of like that they're the two audiences.
Because no one else can afford to go.
Yeah.
So you've got just the people who can afford to go, and they're the hobbyists that go every year, and they're all older because they have money. Or it's like students who are working it.
Yeah.
Or other performers. Like the Edinburgh audience is old people and other performers.
Did you enjoy Edinburgh? Was it worth it for you?
I was like, the funny reaction would just be like, no.
Yeah. And also the accurate reaction.
Well, I don't think it's fully accurate. Like, I do think there's use in doing it.
Yeah.
And my show got better over the month, and I got better, and it also made me write a show. And like, there's definitely benefits to it, but but I mean, everyone agrees, like, it's definitely not what it was. And I don't think you have to do it. No. And I made no money. I sold out an entire month in a much bigger venue than you usually debut in. And I made £300.
Wow.
And I spent £900 on my accommodation. So I lost £600. I know. And that's cheap accommodation. I was living with a mouse.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I think you do, after the month and the breakdown, because you will have a breakdown. I think everyone does go, why are we doing this? But equally, doing like your show every day for a month is like, you don't get to do that anywhere else.
My experience of Edinburgh, particularly this year, but also the year before, I find I struggle with Edinburgh for two reasons. The first week and a half is always great. Everyone's in a good mood. Everyone's kind of excited to be there. No one's tired, or at least that tired yet. And everyone's having a great time, and then it just gradually degrades. And I struggle with it for two reasons, which is, number one, I find and I've spoken about this before, and I will speak about it at length. And when you said to me a minute ago about like, I'm sort of motivated by spite, the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I struggle with hostility from like people feeling like they're competing a bit. Like, I struggle with that, because you end up getting like, I had an act write fake reviews on the Edinburgh Fringe website about the show and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that, like, when you're 3 weeks in, like, I'm the opposite to most people. Like, most people get that fatigued and get a bit, I don't know, sharp, I'd say. I just get like super sensitive. Like, I take everything really personally. I'm like, like, I'll do the show today. Hopefully I'll be all right. Like, hope I get enough comments that make me feel better.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that, which is just like the sheer exhaustion of like not having any time or space to sort of like take a minute and breathe. I remember Troy Hawke, pre him doing stuff online, him and I had the same PR in Edinburgh for one time, and we were at a thing, and he was like, just make sure like you lock space in your day to like go to the gym every day and like find your own time. And to which I just proceeded to ignore that advice completely and never do it.
Yeah.
But like, it was for that. It's like, it's just such a melting pot of stuff that like, it's really hard to not have a breakdown, because you don't have any space to give yourself any room to just like breathe, I think.
Yeah. And you're just surrounded by people going through the same thing.
Yeah. And it's relentless.
And I've never felt so unfun. Like, if anyone stopped me to have a conversation, I was just not fun. It was just like, how are you? I'm like, and then I'd give an honest answer. I couldn't be just like, yeah, I'm great. Yeah. I'd just be like, well, I'm worried about this and I'm worried about that. And I really didn't expect this. And I thought this would be more. And it just wasn't. I think I'm going to do 2 weeks next time.
Yeah.
It's becoming very popular now. I think we are all like, why do we have to do the whole month? Like, there are 100% still benefits. It's fun. And I think it is for most comics just a deadline. It just like makes us write a show.
Yeah, I think
but
that's fair.
It does seem unnecessary to put yourself through the mental trauma of the whole month. And also just the finances is insane.
Yeah.
Especially when now you can like build that following online and just go sell your own venues.
I heard Adam Ray talking about this, and he was like, why would you spend 10 grand on a run from Edinburgh to maybe someone see you, maybe?
Well, I'm like, all those people that saw me could have come to my tour, but they've already seen it now, and I made no money from their tickets. So I'm like, that's, it does kind of boggle your mind.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? Like the sort of like sentimental person in me goes, I'm glad it's there and I don't want to not do it. But then it's kind of like that slow realization of going, it is just ego really that's making me still do it. Or like, or going like, I feel like I should. And like, it's very good as an idea to convince you as a performer that you need to be there. It's the place to be. Yeah.
But also like people who aren't performers don't give a shit. Like, I think that's also the thing is, because even just like transferring your Edinburgh run to Soho Theatre.
Yeah.
Like I chose to do Clapham, and that was one of my freakouts. I was like, oh my God, should I have like tried to get a multiple day run at Soho, because industry wise and like kind of, I don't know the word, but like what people think of you.
Yeah.
Clout. Like they're like, oh my God, they've got a Soho run.
Yeah.
But doing Clapham, you're like, this to a regular just audience member who doesn't know about Soho or doesn't know about Edinburgh, this feels way more legit. Yeah. Like I'm in a huge theatre. This feels like a Netflix special. This is going to make them feel like I'm a proper comic that they want to come back and watch or see on tour. And I think we are all I think Edinburgh was a moment where I was like, I have spent 5 years obsessed with the industry, thinking I'm legit, even though I do TikTok, and seeing me as proper. And then you kind of just realize, I can't chase after that.
Yeah.
Because like they're just not going to.
I completely agree with you with everything though that you're saying as well. I think it's that sort of industry acceptance is something that I think particularly someone like you and I mean, my show's similar in terms of like wasn't doing much at all pre-COVID, and then all of a sudden, like it's these big venues, you get much more jealousy than you get respect. I think a lot of the time. Yeah,
well, they don't want you to be able to do both.
No.
So people don't even come watch the show. They're like, well, that's a TikToker show. So
yeah,
I like they don't even want to come see it. They don't want it to be good.
Yeah.
They'll come in wanting to dislike it as well. So you're having to do that extra bit of like, I've also got to convince them of like, oh shit, this is actually proper stand-up. Like I still have people, even though I present myself that way online, I have a stand-up agent, I like do gigs on circuit. People will still ask me like, so is your show like straight stand-up? I'm like, yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever listen to Stuart Goldsmith's interview on his podcast with Bo Burnham?
No.
So Bo Burnham obviously was a YouTuber in the YouTube days, and that's how he built his audience. And he did an Edinburgh run, and he'd get comics in the queue line going, I didn't realise that 15-year-old girls liked stand-up, like just being real snidey about like, you're a YouTuber and now you're doing stand-up. And it's the same. I think that will never change really. But I think to go back to a much more positive conversation, which is like Clapham Grand and those sorts of things, is I feel like you're right. I feel like, you know, there's a thing in magic, which is, you know, you have the convention acts, which are the people fawn over, and, you know, they get these big audiences at Blackpool or the equivalent effectively of, something like a Soho run or whatever of those sorts of things. And my uncle Paul said to me, he was like, it's like taking monkeys to the zoo to see the other monkeys. Whereas what you want is to like not focus on that because the audience is the
I think that's what I mean, is in like I was obsessed with like I want to impress the industry, and I was like, the industry aren't even coming. They don't want to come watch it, which is fine. Like the people that matter and the people I should be are the people who are turning up and want to see it. And I think I was like, as long as I continue like focusing on quality, as long as like I'm not going, oh well, I don't need to like gig or write new material, like as long as I'm still making a stand-up show that is a proper good stand-up show, like whoever can enjoy it. And eventually maybe the industry will come and then they'll go, oh shit, like, oh, she is proper. But yeah, I think since Edinburgh I have changed my like brain on like, oh fuck it, if the industry come, they'll come, but I can't obsess over that. I need to obsess over these people who want to come watch the show and just make it as good as possible for them. And that's what Clapham felt like. That was like, completely. It was a moment where I was like, all of this effort in every detail. That's why I love when you've like thought through such tiny details that like I feel like sometimes people would be like, oh, that doesn't matter.
Like the house music and the lights.
Yeah. Oh my God, that playlist. I put so much effort into that playlist. And then to have like people do Instagram stories being like, this playlist is banging. You're just like, it's working. All the little things are paying off. And it makes those people feel like they've been to a proper event and their ticket price was worth it. Yeah. And I'm like, that's so much more worth it.
I think those things are the most important thing as well, like setting the stage that isn't the stage. Like I want to have control over the room and like how it feels. So like when they come in, they're kind of expecting, or like maybe not expecting is the wrong word, but sort of feeling a sense of occasion that kind of drives towards the moment when you come on stage, which I think is really...
Yeah, they don't even notice it, but I'm like, every single song is kind of themed to the show, and like they were all female artists, and like it was just, I think that's the fun thing. And those people don't know what Edinburgh even is. They just, and also I think you should just respect when people give you an evening of their week. Yeah. Because that is sacred.
And also they've spent £100 on a meal and money on a babysitter and all that.
Yeah. Like that's an event. So make it feel like an event. And don't worry about...
I also think the longer you do it, you realise that no one has a fucking clue. Like no one knows what they're doing. Like we're all guessing. And so like if you're chasing this sort of thing that's like, this is the dumb way, you get there and you're like, oh no, they would just make it up as well. Yeah. You know, like you kind of find your way of doing, like finding your audience and find your feet on stage and all those sorts of things. What's your process of like going from like a blank sheet of paper to like the show? Like from nothing to this thing that you're proud to give to an audience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was weird because I was a drama kid. So I had done like theatre, I did a theatre degree. So my way of making shows was very like script first, and like knowing the plot and knowing what it's going to be about. Whereas with stand-up, you kind of write your show backwards. I feel like it's a bit like a dissertation where like you collect all the evidence and then you write the in-between bits. And I think with stand-up, you just write jokes. Yeah. And especially for me, because it was my first show, I just wrote jokes for 5 years. I was just gigging. And it was like you write your 5-minute set, then your 10-minute, then your 20, and then you keep going until that 20 is actually good, because usually it's 10 minutes of good stuff and then 10 minutes of fluff. And then the jump to an hour is crazy. Yeah. And then it was just like looking at what I was writing anyway, what I was observing, what I was finding funny. And then I just kind of found a theme within that. I was like, oh, I'm really drawn to this topic and I'm writing a lot about this. Maybe this is kind of what my show's about. And then it is just like months of trying to like put the jokes you already have in an order. And then finding the through line and then trying to tie it all up. And that's the hardest bit, is like formatting it in a way where you're like, I've still got all my best punchlines, but like it is saying something.
So what's the method for you to like find the funny and stuff? Do you like have like, do you know what you're trying to look for, or you're just writing what you think's funny and then going and doing it on stage and going, oh, they laughed at that, that's a good one.
Yep, literally that. Yeah. I'll just like write down a notes app. And it's often just like a conversation with friends where like I'll make a joke and then I am unbearable. Like they do make fun of me, but I'll just be like, I'm like, that might be a bit. And I just kind of like sink down to my phone and they're like, oh my God, you can't. Because it seems so arrogant to just be like, I was just hilarious. Like I smashed that conversation. Or like someone will say something to me that I find interesting and I'll just like note it down. And then I'll just go to a new material night and like try it out, or a story every now and then, but mostly it's observations. And then, you just keep doing it until the stuff that gets a mediocre laugh gets dropped or gets better. I am quite bad at editing. I will just be like, well, that's dead. Write a new one. And then, and that's why it takes so long to write a show, because if you want them all to be bangers, it takes a while to like go, okay, that bit's not good enough, so that is going to get cut and I need to get a better bit to replace it.
Yeah.
But the hope is you just get better at writing, so then that speeds up slightly.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I mentioned this to you before, but it was really interesting to me to see sort of you go from like what is now effectively a huge tour as you, but rewinding that a year and watching like you put online videos of your nights where you're like, there's 4 people in this audience, I hope more arrive, like on the ship or whatever, or like going, oh, this bit was good, and I was talking to my director and he said this, and like, so I'm going to do more of that, or like those little things, like the process and the journey was really interesting to watch it happening almost live on your like Instagram feed basically. And I thought that was a really sort of interesting, sort of intriguing thing to do, because I mean, for me, selfishly, I was like, cool, I'm not my own. Like, what you're feeling is, I feel seen finally. Like, that's how I feel too. But also, like, I remember watching one of your things just pre-Edinburgh where your director was like, go, like, commit to this more. And those little tweaks that you don't see and certainly as an audience don't think about was like a really interesting part of the process for me. Because, like, you go from like writing down 100 jokes to like 10 of them being good, to then going on stage and then having to basically start the process again with like the material you've got to like, how do we make this work to a room and those sorts of things. I think those vlogs, I have had a lot of like other artists really like them. I think, like I'm saying, with the people who don't know what Edinburgh is, they don't care. I think it is. I'm like, I find this so interesting, or at least this is what when I started doing stand-up, because stand-up is such like a mystery world. I didn't even know it could be a job I could consider. And see how wildly overpaid most of the big guys. But it was like, I feel like also when I used to watch TV, I was like, how do you become a TV presenter? Like, what is that? Like, and I kind of felt the same about comedy. I was just like, what? It's like an impossible dream. They just seem like people that were just like always where they are now. And it kind of isn't clear or shown to anyone how you get there. And when I started, I just remember being surprised by so much of like, I didn't think it would be like this, and I find that interesting. And I thought maybe other people would find it interesting. Or like I was saying to you earlier, like I was a drama kid. I saw the musical theatre people vlogging, like, and I was like, why? No one does that for comedy. No one sees. But I guess because also it's a bit shit in comedy. Like, if you're like a West End vlogger, you can be like, and here's the wig room, and here's the costume room, and here's my dressing room, my name on the door. George Clooney's in today. Whereas like with comedy, I'll be like, here's the toilet I'm getting dressed in today. Like, it doesn't matter how. Like, well, we even talk about the backstage here. Like, this is the Comedy Store. I mean, it's still a corridor backstage. But also, like, this is probably the most famous comedy club in the country. And there is someone moving chairs about. And it's like, but I thought it's really fun to show that bit, like it's not as glamorous as you think it is. It is traveling all over the country. It's doing your makeup in the toilet. It's looking out, because also even when like it's going quite well, you still do some gigs where you've just been booked, you're just there for the money. Like, oh my god, freshers gigs,
hell on earth. Like, and you're in a sports bar and the game's playing and they're playing pool. No one wants to watch you. They especially don't want a woman. Like, they're all talking. And I'm like, and all of, all comedians, we bond like we're in the fucking trenches.
Yeah, just trauma.
Just trauma bonding. We do, like, it doesn't matter how well your career's doing, until you are the only gigs you're playing are your own shows.
Yeah.
You do shit gigs, but I
then,
think they're hilarious. And I think it's really fun to show that bit.
Yeah.
Because then it makes the successes so much more satisfying.
I heard Steve Martin talking about it because he was like, he gave up stand-up because he's like, no matter how successful I get, no matter how good I get, out of 5 gigs, 2 of them will be good, 2 of them will be bad, and 1 of them will be average.
Yeah.
But I think just to sort of give you like the counteracting thought, because it feels to me like you're like, it's a waste of time because it's not going viral. My thoughts are from a purely sort of like building a relationship with an audience perspective, it's like layers of content, right? So like, you spray stuff wide where people get to know you and they see your face. And then out of those, there'll be a chunk of people that really do care about like your life and like come on the journey with you. So like the relationship with those people is a much tighter knit thing. So then when those people, even if there's 100 people instead of 1,000 watching, just to make up numbers, that 100 people will be super invested and like really excited to see you when they do come to the show.
And I think also just performers have enjoyed being like, oh, it's not just me. I think people, like, I have just had a lot of messages from comedians being like, it's nice to know you're going through that as well. Like, because I think you do, I have had the thing with, just because you have followers and you have a page, that people very much are just like, oh, well, she's fine.
Yeah.
Like, everything's going great for her. She has no worries. And I think sharing like, no, I also...
And it's hard work. Like the flywheel's
terrified
moving.
No one will turn up. Like, it's a fear no matter what, because like, yeah, you have a follower account online, but that doesn't mean that those people are going to be bothered to go onto a ticket website, buy tickets, turn up to a gig.
Yeah.
It's a big difference, like having a following and having a following that will turn up.
Yeah.
And watch you live.
Yeah, completely. Are you excited about the tour?
Yes.
Yeah. What part of the process, what out of the 5 stages of grief are you in right now?
Yeah, I think like post Clapham, I was like raving to go. I was like, this is amazing.
Did you have that thing where you came off a Clapham and then you spent like 3 days just going, I need to rest. Like, I'm going to let this.
Yeah. I took the weekend. That's why I didn't answer your messages. I was just like, I was in a bit of a daze, but I think it was quite a funny decision to do Clapham first and then tour.
The thing I
because
found,
I will not be touring to venues like Clapham. I will be back in the toilet getting changed.
What I'll say though is like, you've got so much momentum off Clapham, in terms of like people that came to the show, but also people talking about it, and you with like cool as fuck pictures and like all of that stuff. So that will carry just a load of momentum.
Well, that's why I did it.
Yeah.
Because I think this was kind of like new way, meet old way frustration I had post Edinburgh as well, is that I put a lot of time and effort into like vlogs and taking people on this journey and getting people invested in the build up to the show, as well as then doing the show and then having that kind of journey of then the success of the show. And I felt like everyone who followed me knew I was doing this show. I built this hype. And then the just industry standard of when, because again, it was my debut, which in comedy is like your first show, but that usually is like you are unknown, you're a complete newcomer to the scene, you're in a 30-seater cave.
Yeah.
And then we like build this hype of like, who is this new person? Oh, wow. And the industry standard with the like agent I was with is that you then tour in April, May. And
following August?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're seen as quite separate things, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas I was like, well, I have the hype right now. Like I should be going straight out on tour and like riding this wave, which just didn't happen because all of that was kind of realized too late. And I was just doing it the industry standard way. And I was doing it as a debut. Whereas like debuts with social media followings is a new thing that people haven't really realized is different.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to rebuild the hype again. Like I can't just like 5 months later be like, hey, remember that show I did? Do you remember it?
Completely.
It's going on tour now. So like, it was like, I want to do a big show that brings attention back to it to then sell it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to me because like I'm heavily ADHD in terms of like not the hyperactive stuff, but ADD technically. But like with that, like the way it's been really powerful for me in terms of my career is it meant I was really good at like spotting patterns and stuff. And so like I've always been that sort of like precocious of like, why don't we just do this? And so then I've always kind of like juxtaposed like industry standards for stuff, like, because I'm like, I've sold out 2 nights here, why don't we put in another 2, like that kind of thing. And I think that's maybe sort of like you being on top of the stuff you're posting online and like whether people are responding well to it and those sorts of things has kind of sets you up in a good place for like when it comes to live stuff, you're like, this is working, like let's do this, like let's do more of this, and like here's the momentum, let's do that. And I think that's a really interesting place to be, because I think it will take, you know, it's the same thing with like when YouTube was first the thing, is it takes established like companies and whatever a long time to go, oh shit, like oh, we're behind. Let's put.
I think that is also why I'm so tired. Is it's because like not many people are doing it how I've done it. Yeah, like more and more people are now. But I think because I did lockdown, which was kind of the big boom of socials, I was still one of the first people who do proper stand-up, the circuit, not just their own shows, and socials, which meant I didn't really have anyone to turn to for advice on how it's done, because no one had really done it. And I have like maybe 3 friends who also do it, and we all just go for a coffee and we're like, what are we doing? What are our aims? Where do we go? Because there isn't a set way to do it, which there is from the past. It was like you would gig, you would do the panel shows, you would get live at the Apollo, that would be enough to sell a tour, boom, you're made. Whereas that doesn't exist anymore, or it does, but only for the people who've already done it.
Not in the same way anyway.
Yeah.
Like live at the Apollo isn't.
But equally, no one's shown the exact way to do it now, because like people are still going to Edinburgh, like, is this the way still? Like, well, we're just going to keep doing it until someone proves otherwise. And I think that is what's made it, is I feel like I've been like fighting an established way of doing it. There's a saying
about it as well that's like, you can always tell the innovators because they're the ones that have the arrows in their back, because they're the one that's
you feel like you're taking a lot of hits for everybody else.
And like you're leading the charge, and then you're like, and that's what the tiredness is, right? It's like you're like batting the stuff away or putting out fires or like spinning plates, and like you're not just following the formula.
And you've got to fight people who go, well, this is how we do it. You have to be the annoying one. Like I said, sometimes I feel annoying that I'm like, well, why can't we do it like this? Why don't we do it like this?
You need to have strength in like.
And then you see the people who are only starting socials now, and you're like, oh, it's so much easier now because they just don't even have the like turning the nose up at socials. When I started, people were like, well, is she serious about comedy? Does she proper comedy? Like, she clearly isn't that serious about stand-up because she just does social media. Whereas now, people start doing little skits online. People are like, yeah, mate, I get it. It's got to be done. Do you know what I mean? And you're just like, even just that is tiring, having to fight against that. Whereas like now people don't have to do it because it's become more established. But
yeah, I find quite a lot of peace with all of that sort of stuff. When you look at Foil Arms and Hog, who are, you know, they still are churning out content relentlessly, and that is what is fueling their live show, which they can do McEwan for a month in Edinburgh, and it's like Underbelly's #1 selling show, and has been for the last 10 years. And then they do the States, and then they do Ireland, they do the whole of the UK, and like all of these massive rooms. And so like I always drew quite a lot of inspiration from that I was like, no, this will, if you stick on that path, those numbers will translate from things that just isn't real. Like I'm in the bath looking numbers on a screen. To
that
like,
doesn't feel real.
Now this, you know.
Yeah. I feel, it's I don't know. It's just tiring. I feel like I'm just complaining. I'm just being like, but like it has such huge payoffs. And it's just what I've chosen. It's like that roller coaster. Like you take the hits and the lows, because you do get incredible highs where you're like, this is unreal. And literally, if me 5 years ago saw this, I'd be so happy with myself.
Have you ever seen? There's a podcast by a guy called Chris Williamson. It's like it's called it's something inspirational. One more time. Modern Wisdom. It's called Modern Wisdom, and he talks about, he's like, the most successful person is the person that has the most agency over their own life. And that's kind of like where we are, right? Is it's like you go, yeah, it's stressful and tiring, but fundamentally I'm deciding that I want to go on stage. And if I didn't want to do it, I don't have to do it. You know, I'm doing it because with all the peaks and troughs and tiredness and the creativity and like the good shows and the bad shows and the storming it and the bombing it, I'm doing what I'm deciding to do. And that's why it's something worth doing.
Well, that's why I always like stand-up as well. It's just that like you are in full control. I think that is, it's like, it's the good and the bad thing. Because the bad bit of it is that like, it's so much to take on.
Yeah.
And there are so many jobs and you just can't take a day off. But it does mean that like when you do put that show on, like I was saying, of like every detail ever, like it's exactly what you want and it's exactly how you want it and it's the standard you want and it's what you want to present to people. Whereas it is, as soon as you start relying on other people to care as much as you or like try as hard as you
or have your creativity
or even just cast you, like that's why I loved comedy, is like no one has to give you permission. When I did like drama or whatever, you're auditioning for shows, you're writing scripts, you're sending them off, you're like, do you like it, please see something. And I guess that's what I still crave, is I'm like, just that one moment where someone goes, actually you've proven enough, I want to give you something. But the great thing about socials and stand-up is you don't have to wait for that, although it would be lovely. Like you can, there's always something I can do for my career. There's always something productive and proactive I can do, and I don't have to wait for someone else to let me do it.
I think you're a real sort of testament to like creating your own everything, really. Like you're creating your own path, and you're not doing, as you're saying, you're not just going and fingers crossed and hoping and waiting for someone to say, here you go. You are creating and building an audience and then like just doing it and doing everything that you would like to do. It's really, it's a sort of inspirational way of living, I think, and of creating the career. Is like just deciding this is what I'm going to do and this is what I want to do and I'm going to do it regardless of what anyone says.
But it is also just like a privilege to be able to do that, and like there are other creative jobs where you can't do that as much. And I think I think my parents are jealous. I think like not, because they kind of are settled and have accepted the careers they've had and whatever, but I think like they are like it's they have to wait, they have to audition, they have to have someone else be like, I want you to be in my show. And then also even when you're in the show, you have to deliver the lines how they want you to deliver the lines. You have to write lines other people have written, and they are like, I'm jealous that, and I'm dating a drummer at the moment. Brag. A musical theatre drummer. Let's not get too excited. And I remember I was like writing a sketch, and however stressful I found it, he was like, I am jealous that like you have an idea, you just make it. You can just make it. You can just be like, well, I'm just going to make that and I'm going to put it out, and you have that agency. Whereas I think other people do have to rely on other people and wait around.
If you're an actor or something like that and you're out of work, you have to wait for the next job, whereas we just go and create it.
You're just like, well, I want to do something, so I will do it.
Question for you. So how do you book tickets to your show?
You go onto my socials at Abi Clarke Comedy and you click my link tree and then you click the tour info tickets and you'll just see everywhere I'm going and how to get tickets.
Brilliant. When do you start?
I don't start till April, which is why I'm quite chilled at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
The stress will start again.
This is the chilled Abi Clarke.
This is the nice bit. This is the nice bit where I'm just like, hey, tickets are selling, but like I don't need to stress about like how many or how quickly, because it's ages away.
Amazing.
But yeah, I've got 2 dates at the Bristol Vic in February, but they're already sold out.
Nice.
And then it doesn't start properly till April, May.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We've had a lovely conversation.
We've had a lovely moan.
We have. This is therapy at this point.
Yeah, honestly, actually, I feel like I should be paying you. Like, thank you for letting me come and rant. Really appreciate
Anytime
it.
You can
I'll be asking you to edit a lot of it out, I
think. Thank you so much for coming, and I will see you soon. So that was Abi Clarke, who is in this really interesting place in her career. Like, she's clearly about to break through into something amazing. Like, she is a name that if you're walking around Edinburgh, people will recognise, and has kind of come from, as she said, like the world of online, and is now doing a stand-up tour and all these sorts of things. She has a huge audience, and what was really interesting to me is she's very much in a place that I find myself in, which is carrying a lot of the stresses and strains of being in showbiz yourself, in terms of like the weight of the creativity, the weight of the business side. And I think that's why she's becoming successful and is doing it at the pace in which she is, because she's on top of things. She's not waiting for things to happen for her. I think that's the real lesson from Abi, is that don't wait, just create your own opportunities and make it happen. I think she's going to go through a journey in the next couple of years where she realizes that that's what everyone's doing. It seemed to me today that she was talking a lot about like she felt like she was a bit on the outside of the industry, or that other people get a sort of overnight success or plucked out of thin air or given these platforms, whereas I think what's the closer to the truth is that everyone is doing what she's doing. They're fighting and working, and the ones that are doing what she is doing are the ones that become succceitful. The other thing I'll say is apologies for the noise in here today. It's just the quirks and the perks of being in a basement comedy club in the West End of London. I hope it wasn't too distracting for you. Until next time, thank you so much. Goodbye.